first of all, welcome. Pretty Good AI webinar. We're going to talk about webinars and healthcare. So AI growth, AI voice, bunch of cool stuff. So let's see next slide. Let's see who your speakers are. So Anand and I have been working together for like 2 decades now. It's crazy. Started way back. And then Kayla and Emily run our onboarding teams. And so between the four of us, we're going to walk through a bunch of things, just thinking about, how healthcare grows and really how healthcare business has changed. And we've seen this accelerate over the last couple years with AI, kind of unprecedented. And I've been doing software now for, wow, almost 30 years. And I think to see the change that is happening and the rate of change that is going through the industry has really been fun. And all the places that AI is showing up, both good AI and bad AI. And, maybe we'll talk about the name Pretty Good AI as we get farther in the conversation. But it's always a good one. So with that, we won't read everybody's bio today to save you a little time. So we'll jump into it and kind of kick it off. And Anand's going to start just kind of to set the context of kind of why we're here. But really, like, feel free to ask questions on any topic. Like I said, we've been, working in healthcare now for a couple years, really focused on AI voice on the front desk and on call center side. But it's amazing how this has touched so many different pieces of the business, and really healthcare in many cases is a business, right? Like, and to make this really work, you really need to understand how it grows and how it works. And I think we're going to share a lot about what we've seen and sort of our experience with rolling this out across many of the practices we work with. But every health system and every practice is a little different. And so would love specific questions from your practice of like, hey, that doesn't sound like something that's going to work for me, or it does sound like something that's going to work, and challenge us. And I think that'll make this conversation even more interactive. And I'll kind of stand by and interrupt as questions come in, kind of as we're going through the presentation, if things pop up. And if we don't get to them, we'll definitely email out the answers at the end when we send out the recap. So with that, let me hand it over to Anand, and he's going to walk us through some of the highlights here to get us started.
Yeah. So today we just wanted to talk about growing your healthcare business. Like Kevin said, that's not the exclusive topic. So if you have any questions, just pop them in. We can interrupt. Kevin will interrupt me. He's our amazing multitasker, and we can answer your questions and take your questions as we go along. So I mean, healthcare is like any other business, right? So there is the top line and the bottom line. So growth is about growing the top line and the bottom line. And the top line, like any other business, you bring in leads and you convert more of them. You worry about your funnel and how your funnel is changing and all that. And then bottom line is like, how are you? Are you being efficient? Are you using all your resources properly? And that's, MBA 101, right? But healthcare, the growth is a little bit hard, because even though those fundamentals are the same, the actions that you need to take in healthcare, say, for example, you're moving somebody through your lead funnel, the actions are very hard. And right now it's very manual. And one of the things that the latest wave of AI is promising is that it can help in those actions. So like, to make it very concrete, you could get a fax come in, right? And then somebody has to look at the fax, find the patient, call them and book them. And then as you're scheduling them, you have to make sure that insurance is still up to date, and that, have they had like some recent labs done? And, do you have access to those? Do those come in through the fax or not? And so there's a lot of like a nuance to moving somebody through a funnel in a healthcare practice. And then there's also like a lack of visibility on how to be more operationally efficient, and that impacts your bottom line. And that's another area where AI is like showing a lot of promise. And Emily and Kayla are going to walk you through like what we actually see. And so I just wanted to start with like, growth is important, but it's hard, right, in healthcare. And then the other thing that is happening is that how healthcare practices approach growth is also changing. So it used to be like the CMO owned the cost per acquisition or cost per lead, and then the booking appointment rate, it maybe went to the front desk team that was actually doing the scheduling. Revenue metrics belonged maybe to the billing department or the revenue department. And honestly, retention and reactivation, most healthcare practices just don't have the bandwidth to focus on that metric. That's the honest truth, because it's all right now so complicated and manual, and it requires a lot of human time to get done. So the metrics are like across the organization in different places. So there is this shift now to have a chief growth officer for your healthcare practice, and somebody that owns all the metrics together. And then if you look at the metrics that drive your growth, they broadly fall into like two buckets, right? One is the patient experience. They came in as soon as you got them in somehow through a fax or like a form on the web because you marketed to them, etc. Like, how you take their experience all the way to where they come back for a follow-up visit. And then there is also like, are your doctors seeing patients 100% of the time that they're available, right? So these both buckets seem like areas where AI can really help the current crop of AI. So if AI can help, are people using AI, right? So this first statistic agrees a little bit with what I said, which is that 62% of the industry feels that AI can actually help with the patient engagement and experience and clinical operations and all that. But only 29% of them are doing projects, have started projects, right? There's two ways to look at this 9% of the number. One is like, I don't think there's any other technology that in like a year and a half has grabbed 29% of attention from the healthcare industry. So there's something very unique happening here. But then there is the question of how are these 29% doing and why are the other 71% not doing anything? And that's because there's this famous MIT study that came out like sometime last year, and you've probably seen it, heard of it. 95% of AI pilots failed. They studied like about $40 billion worth of AI investment across all industries, and they found that there is very little value being returned, and negative value, and sometimes in 95% of these investments. And the reason this is happening is because there is a lot of cookie cutter AI. Like people are treating AI like the old SaaS. It's like, I buy this software and I just turn it on and I push a few buttons. But in reality, for your AI pilot to succeed, you have to customize it to how you work as a business and your demographic and all of that. And so but it's not all bad news, right? Like what we are seeing actually is that 100% of the customers that engage in a pilot with us convert into paying customers to us. And so there is really a great way to use AI and derive value. You just have to be thoughtful about it. And that's to grow your business. And that's what we want to talk to you about today. So there's 14% is just money you're leaving on the table because you have empty appointment slots and doctors not being fully utilized. It's not just a revenue metric. There is so much demand for healthcare also. So you're underserving your community and patients. So this 14% number can be looked at both like a money number, but also like the purpose and nobility number, right? And then if you do it very thoughtfully, you get like a $3.2 return on every dollar you invest in AI, right? So even though there is a lot of adoption and a lot of fear with AI, the people that work with us, this is the kind of results that we are seeing. So how are we getting these results? And where are people using AI? I'll have Emily walk you through those things.
Thank you, Anand. Yeah, so we've talked about the scale and the challenge facing healthcare practices today regarding how to implement AI effectively and the gap between patient and demand and the ability to respond quickly and consistently. So what I'd like to do now is zoom in on the patient journey a little bit itself. So we know that speed to contact is the highest variable in lead conversion. Leads contacted within 5 minutes are 9 times more likely to convert than those contacted after 30 minutes. But when we think about conversion, there's a tendency to often focus on the things that happen before that lead arrives. When a patient raises their hand and says, I'm interested, the game changes. And in fact, another study recently found that new patients who wait over 1 month for their initial appointment are more than twice as likely to cancel and not reschedule compared to those who secure an appointment within 1 week. So the challenge is that most healthcare organizations aren't staffed immediately to respond to every inquiry, every referral, every website form submission or after hours call, whatever the task may be. So patients today don't necessarily compare healthcare experiences to other healthcare experiences. They may just compare them to other digital experiences and expect that same immediacy and momentum that they get at other services. So the longer that the momentum stalls, the more likely they are to take their business elsewhere. So if we think about closing the gap intelligently, historically, automating operations has not been a reality without AI. But once a patient is able to enter your pipeline via an AI-enabled workflow, we're able to greater access and greater retention. So before a patient's ever experience care, they'll experience those gates to access. So can you reach someone, get answers? Can you schedule an appointment? And when you encounter friction, they often leave a clinical relationship behind before it's ever established. So the question becomes, how do we remove friction at scale without simply adding more clutter to your existing operations and your tech stack? And that's where AI becomes incredibly powerful, not as a replacement, but we ensure that patients are moving forward whenever they're ready to engage. So we see here that the ease of business will actually drive loyalty and retention more so than those clinical outcomes might even have an effect. So when we think about the patient journey, there are so many touch points that our marketing teams, your operation teams have enabled. We often think about a single use case, though, when we think about AI, maybe answering phones or scheduling appointments or your RCM, one specific task that you're looking to streamline within your operations. But the real opportunity with AI is so much broader than that. And these high value moments in the patient journey tend to come down to the moments where that momentum is most likely to break down. So when a patient calls after hours, but they can't get through, but perhaps maybe that's their only time they're able to call. AI is able to answer immediately and leaves the call. The caller leaves the call with a scheduled appointment or even a notification to your team to conduct that outbound outreach the next day, depending on the type of care, your existing operations. Same thing if a physician faxes over a referral, being able to automatically process that referral and see it in that patient chart in real time the next day, leaving your team to take care of the things that are a little more high touch or high necessity, I guess, in terms of that human to human interaction. But creating continuity across all of these touch points instead of patients and providers waiting for the next available staff member, we keep these workflows moving. And these are the kinds of operational bottlenecks that we're helping organizations address today. So historically, healthcare organizations have had a visibility problem. Marketing teams can tell you how many leads they've generated, and maybe your operations team can tell you how many appointments were booked. But connecting those two realities has often been surprisingly difficult. So if you can tell you what channel they came from, who referred them, or what touchpoint converted them when you see that appointment booked for the next week or the next day. And so without that knowledge, your media spend is essentially a guess. And it's hard to know which campaigns are actually driving patients, which referral sources are performing best, and where patients might be dropping out of the journey. So with an AI-mediated workspace, when we consider every interaction, every outcome, those things are now measurable, whereas before they were not. So and that AI agent is to answer a call or follow up on a lead, process a referral, schedule an appointment. Those events can become connected across the patient journey using an AI tool. So instead of simply measuring activity, organizations can measure these outcomes and understand what channels, touch points, engagement strategies are ultimately resulting in booked visits, patient revenue, and perhaps most importantly, access to patient care. So when optimization becomes possible, you're no longer guessing at where this value is being created. So conversion gaps, like what we're addressing today, rarely happen because patients don't need care, but they happen because, like I said, that momentum is interrupted when that call goes unanswered or the referral waits in the queue and an appointment opportunity is missed, whatever the case may be. So in this new era of AI, we can close these gaps by providing continuous 24/7 engagement across these moments that matter the most, whether that's handling inbound scheduling or conducting outbound follow-ups or multiple outbound touch points to make sure that leads that have already lost some momentum are renewed in your patient pipeline. So because these interactions are able to occur around the clock, thanks to AI, organizations can gain both greater operational efficiency and provide a better patient experience. The result isn't simply more automation, it's a patient journey that's centered upon responsiveness and is more measurable for your team and ultimately more accessible. And with that, I'll hand it over to Kayla to give us a look into how we have been achieving this at Pretty Good AI.
Thanks, Emily. So you guys are all probably wondering, what does this actually look like behind the scenes? Um, so what you're seeing here is a visualization of our platform managing many conversations simultaneously. Each dot represents an active interaction, and each interaction can follow its own unique path depending on the patient's needs. Some callers may be scheduling appointments or checking referral status, confirming information, asking questions, or being routed to the appropriate team member. All of these workflows are happening at the same time in real time. What's important is that this isn't a scripted phone tree. The system is continuously interpreting patient intent, retrieving information, taking action, and adapting the conversation based on content. The result is a patient experience that feels natural and responsive while giving healthcare organizations the ability to scale access far beyond what would be possible with staffing alone. And to make this more concrete, we have a real world example for you. In this scenario, a nurse is calling about a pain clinic to check on status of a patient referral. Rather than navigating hold times or waiting for staff availability, she's able to have a direct conversation with our AI agent and quickly get the information she needs. One detail that's worth noting before we play this call is that the referral being discussed was originally received as a fax. So our platform can process the incoming fax documents and extract the relevant information and make that information available within downstream workflows. That means that this information traditionally lives in a fax inbox can now become immediately actionable. So it supports both patient-facing and staff-facing interactions without requiring manual review at each step. That we can listen to the conversation.
Help you today?
Hi, my name is, I'm a heart failure nurse. I faxed a referral on July 16th, and I'm following up to make sure that you all received that referral.
Thanks for following up. Can you please provide the full name and date of birth of the patient you faxed the referral for?
Date of birth is
Got it. Let me check the system to see if her referral has been received. Any is in our system but hasn't been. We'll need to go through our new patient process. Let me check the system right now to see if her referral has been received and if she's eligible to schedule. I can confirm her referral is on file and she's eligible to schedule a new patient consultation.
Does the patient need to call to schedule an appointment?
You can either call us to schedule her new patient visit, or if you prefer, I can start the scheduling process for her right now.
She will be calling you directly.
No problem. Is there anything else I can help you with today?
Are you an automated system or are you a live person?
I'm an automated system designed to help with appointments and clinic questions. If you need to speak with a live person, I can connect you to our clinic support team. Would you like to be transferred?
No, thank you. It was interesting talking to you.
Glad I could help. Have a great day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
So one of the benefits of AI-powered scheduling that often gets overlooked is visibility. Emily touched on this a bit, but historically, healthcare organizations only had insight into the calls that happened while staff were available to answer them. But now when we have AI available 24/7, we gain a much more complete picture of patient demand. So what you're looking at here is a heat map. This shows when patients are actually reaching out across days and times. And in many cases, organizations discover significant activity occurring after hours, on weekends, or even during periods when phone coverage is limited. That visibility helps answer important operational questions. When do patients prefer to engage? Where are there opportunities that are being missed today? And how should staffing and scheduling strategies evolve to meet real patient demand? AI doesn't just help capture those interactions, it helps organizations understand them and measure them, make better decisions in the future because of it. Once organizations can see demand more clearly, the next step is acting on it. So what we're looking at here is provider schedule utilization. Even within the same organization, fill rates often vary dramatically across locations, providers, and days of the week. Some schedules are fully booked weeks in advance, while others have available capacity that patients may not be aware of. AI creates an opportunity to intelligently rebalance that demand. So when appropriate, patients can be guided toward early appointments or alternate locations, or even providers with greater availability. The goal isn't to simply fill schedules, it's to connect patients with care more quickly while also helping organizations make better use of existing capacity. Over time, those small optimizations can have a meaningful impact on patient satisfaction and operational efficiency. With that, I hand it over to you, Kevin.
Awesome. Cool. So, I mean, now hopefully, I think, if you didn't believe this coming into this, coming out of it, you kind of need AI, right? And so I think everybody's talking about it. In fact, arguably too much in some circles from what we've seen. So let's dive a little deeper into when you're thinking about, making a choice, or if you already started to make that choice and decision, how we've sort of seen practices that we've worked with and health systems that we've worked with make that. So there's a few things you can look at it, right? I mean, AI is not the same, right? I think we've all used ChatGPT, Claude, et cetera, and those are great. I mean, we use them every day. We ask them questions. In fact, you can dump a fax in there or a document and ask about it, and it actually gives you a pretty good answer. But to do that with voice, and in fact, voice is one of the trickiest, and which is why we decided to start there. You need high intelligence fast. So, right, you need to be smart and you need to be fast, right? I wouldn't be able to put my words into ChatGPT and then respond back and have Anand answer me questions and kind of have a real-time conversation that makes any sense if there's a long delay. And so getting it to be quick is important. But to get it to be quick, to work with some of the health systems and sort of the EHRs and sort of the systems that most medical practices are using today, typically is very tricky because a lot of times those APIs aren't available. They're only accessible when you have the right level of HIPAA or high trust, SOC, et cetera. You've went through the right compliance. And so what we typically see is a lot of customers are like, oh, I've got a phone system. Let me just use the phone agents or the AI that came with my phone system. And what typically happens is it starts to seem like it's good. It answers a few questions. It maybe helps you not have to push one or two, but it really just is a smarter rules-based system. It's not actually thinking. And so the next piece is really understanding how do you achieve high performance? Like, are you actually getting high containment? And we typically see customers, 50, 60% of their calls fully contained and handled by AI. And this includes complex scheduling, procedures, medication refills, routing clinic collections to the right group, billing and understanding, like, is billing pay my bill or is it billing related to a prior author insurance I'm going back? So all of these sort of tricky pieces that come across. And as you look at this kind of current slide, it's like today people pick different slices of this world, right? I've got, historically in medical, you had something working on fax, something working for your analytics, something working on your text messaging, a different thing on your web scheduler. And the problem is if they're all trying to do AI or even trying to just do the same thing, they end up with lots of conflicts. And so what you really need is a central brain that sort of sits above your EHR or above your practice to really understand that entire patient journey and keep a coherent and sort of clear and consistent way of communicating, right? And so I think that's the piece that we see where the success happens is you move away from this kind of traditional way in healthcare where you would buy point solutions for each of the sort of vendor sort of slices of the world and move to a model where you've got a centralized sort of brain that's operating across your practice for all of the things, not only that the patients need, but that the practice administrator and then the providers need. And so I always like to think about it as from the moment you meet somebody on this, from a referral or from a web ad or however they discover your practice, all the way through until they're billing and offboarding and sending records requests to the next practice they're going to go visit. That's one unified sort of train to really understand that context and keep it together. So as we think about this and sort of thinking about, how do we, kind of bring this to leadership, right? Because a lot of the next questions like really like, okay, I've got this. How do I take this to my team or my boss or the practice owners to really think about this? To us, it's like, first, you've got to solve the quality, right? You really need to quantify what is the gap that you're trying to solve. Is it a software issue? Is it a product issue? Is there actual workflow gaps in understanding that? And then thinking about how that is really an ROI, right? This isn't a traditional thing where you're buying a vendor and thinking about getting budget for this. It's really understanding like, a lot of the first level thinking is like, oh, it's this going to replace, some of my missed calls. But it ends up saying, no, it actually frees up the critical staff time that you need, whether it's your front desk or your call center, to allow them to go spend time on more important things inside the practice, many times actually greeting and working with patients as they're in the practice. And so for us, we want to see that ROI quickly. And so our best sort of implementations, so typically 3 to 6 weeks, but in 30 days, you should start to see that measurable improvement. And we don't sign long-term contracts. We've sort of taken a different approach and said, hey, it's only going to be month to month. We need to the first month is free so that you can see and earn that value. And then more importantly, you're only going to pay month to month. And just like your Netflix subscription that doesn't offer an annual contract, we don't want to offer that. We want to know that we earn the business of our customers month after month over and over without sort of fail. And we find that builds a better relationship with our customers and they build a better relationship with their patients. And the goal as you look across that is that you see this sort of really natural transition where all of the pilots that we've started, where customers engage with those pilots and work with Kayla and Emily's team to onboard and start listening to those calls, 100% of those have converted to paid. And surprisingly, 100% of our customers have stayed with us, over the journey, even though none of them are locked into contracts. And so I think, that's a testament to how hard we really want to work on this to make people happy and deliver that solution. But it also sort of is a testament to, as we see so many AI pilots failing across the industry, especially in healthcare, we think there's a huge gap in sort of understanding how to bring that to life, but also thinking about it as a holistic solution and not trying to just solve one point thing inside of a practice. And so with that, we'll shift here towards the close and really want to open it up for questions, additional thoughts. I see a few questions already in the chat, so I'll start with those. But if you want to grab a demo or if you want to just come to the site, you can hit the QR code. Obviously, we'll send a recording of this for those that weren't able to catch the start or, want a colleague to share this with, and happy to walk through that. But I think the first question is actually one for Anand. Someone is asking, how typically does like onboarding work? Like what do you guys do when you first meet a practice? I think you, Kayla and Emily and the team, like really, this is the magic thing is like, okay, this is great. It slides. I've heard a couple demo calls. Like, what does it actually look like to try this at a practice?
Yeah. So we get access to your EHR data. So we ask you for your permission. We have the BAA and all those agreements. So we are allowed to look at your data. So we look at your data and we take a day to digest what's happening at your practice. And then we come to you and we have anywhere from a 2 to 3 hour conversation over a couple of days and ask us to walk you through how your practice works. And we condense all of that into like a configuration that we then take and give our engineering team, and our engineering team, like under a week, they stand up a system that basically enables workflows for your practice, right? We've tried various different things. I think if we just send you like here's a form and you go fill it and all that, like it's very tedious. There is just way too much nuance in how healthcare works, like appointment types, and there's workers' compensation and motor vehicle accident. And by the way, we have we need a companion appointment because an interpreter needs to be booked. So there is a lot of complexity. Every healthcare practice is unique. And so we think of it as it needs to be a partnership. And so we start with that 2 hour conversation. And then once the system is ready, we ask you to test it. And then we test it with real patient data and traffic. And then we're meeting with you every other day as we make improvements. And in about 2 to 3 weeks, we're launched and ready.
Awesome. Thanks, Anand. Next one, I think, is for Emily. It's from a behavioral health practice. Like we work with a lot of behavioral health practice, but they're curious, like, how do we handle that safely? And like, what are some of the hard things that you've seen on behavioral health? And would love to sort of like maybe touch on some of the things you guys have run into. I know you're working with a couple of them right now.
Yeah, of course. Thank you. Yeah, so with behavioral health, it's such a sensitive patient interaction, right? We have quite a few call handling procedures, at least on our voice side, to ensure that that patient experience retains that level of discretion and respect for the real issues that patients are dealing with. So one of the things, for instance, is for patients under 18 at a particular practice, if a parent calls and says, oh, I'm so-and-so's parent, identifies, then they go through an entire patient identification flow that we've established with that practice. We actually have guardrails in place to make sure that we're checking for a HIPAA release form on file to make sure that we have that patient's consent or everything's checked out or whatever your internal procedures might be if you were to answer that call, to make sure that we're not releasing that patient's information if that parent isn't supposed to know that that child is receiving therapy or psychiatric care in a situation that might otherwise be sensitive. So things like that are things that we really do try to incorporate into our workflows. And part of that time that Anand was discussing, where we sit down with you to discuss your rules and operations, we have a comprehensive kind of modular questionnaire that we'll fill out with our customers that we work with, so that we make sure we're covering those specialty specific problems that we want to make sure that we're able to address on the front end, even when it comes to controlled substance schedules and outcome measurement tracking and things like that. So it's something that we have really, I think, built a strong knowledge base in, so that we're able to deliver upon the kind of specialty care that you all are providing.
Awesome. Thanks, Emily. Kayla, next one's for you, I think. This is funny because I know you ran into this last week we were talking about it. Like maybe you can talk about like what's a common challenge or somebody that, you see something run into where practices really struggle with.
So I think one main thing that comes up is like when we're going in and like configuring the phones, something that comes up is like we get to just turning it on and off, and sometimes we like the person that runs the phones says they run the phones like don't actually know how to run the phone. So that's kind of a blocker for us sometimes. But I think in terms of actually configuring the system, one challenge is, a lot of these practices have their SOPs in paper form and like, or they live on a sticky note on the, a representative's computer. And so kind of capturing all of those, all of the workflows that are, not inside the EHR and not maybe even being followed consistently across the practice, that's tough to configure. But like one thing that we do is we can help the practice come to a decision and like really establish those workflows that they're in place moving forward and they're able to follow them more consistently.
Yeah, totally. It's kind of funny because like people a lot of times will be like, oh, here's our documentation. And then we'll like implement exactly what's in the documentation. And they'll be like, oh, wait, I forgot we changed that. Or there's this sticky note on this thing, or there's this binder that you do the lookup. And so, yeah, it's definitely, a common one. On it, any questions that I have a couple more here, but I think, I want to wrap up because to be sensitive of time. Like any questions that you have come to mind or heard that or last closing thoughts before we wrap this out. I also dropped in the chat just a link to the website. If the QR code doesn't work, I see it's a little pixelated for some folks are saying that the QR code didn't scan. But if that's your problem, no problem. Just click on the website. You can click demo. It's the same link up in the corner. And again, you don't have to do a demo if you just want to book time to talk about kind of AI opportunities and quite frankly, like optimization. I think a lot of times folks come to us and they're just not sure where to start with AI. And I think that's been a common question that we've worked through. But before we wrap it up, Anna, do you maybe want to grab the last word and kind of bring us to a close here?
So Kevin, like I think one thing that'll be useful for folks to know is when we talk to people and we say, hey, in healthcare, this is the AI adoption curve and all that. What do people get excited about and what are people afraid of? What do you
Yeah.
see out there when you
I didn't expect you to ask me the question, but I think I think the thing that people get excited for is that like it literally is this like sense of relief of like someone kind of being there to help, right? It really is like bringing in a new staff member that is at times, kind of like an intern or sort of starts off with like relatively elementary knowledge, but the rate of learning and the rate of availability, like, this intern doesn't take breaks. And I think with one clinic, we turned it on and like in the first hour, it was taking like 10 or 11 simultaneous calls at the same time. And it was a front desk where they only had literally 2 people on the phones. And so you knew by definition, it was really helping. We had another call center that was much larger. And I think they had about 25 people in the call center. And that first day, there was 70 calls. At the first minute when they opened up. And it's just really cool to see everybody has this kind of sense of the Mondays and they know that SLAs, wait times, it's just going to be trickier on Mondays when you've been closed all weekend. And so I think that sense of relief on Mondays is I think where a lot of people first are like, wow, this was pretty impactful and really made a big difference to me. But I think, it would go without saying that like people are still afraid of technology. I think, there's been a really challenge with good technology built for healthcare over the, many decades. And even worse, there's just been so much bad AI and so many bad robots that even myself, when I get a phone call or I'm on the phone and I hear robots or I hear an AI, I'm like representative star, star, star. And so it takes time for that to kind of untrain that natural behavior for patients and callers to be like, oh, wait, this thing actually can think. And when I say like, I want to schedule an appointment next Tuesday and today's Tuesday, it actually knows what next Tuesday means. Or or if I say Monday and I want to do it next week, it knows that next week is actually next, and it's so funny that we've seen so many bad examples of that. And, you're kind of repeating and raising your voice to a robot that does, it's a real concern. I think the other place this shows up is older patients and rural patients. And quite frankly, it's where a lot of healthcare struggles because there is in these rural neighborhoods and rural health center systems, it is a lot harder to hire and keep staffed where, sometimes you just don't have the budget to have enough people in the room to pick those phone calls up. And then you're working with, elderly patients that sometimes have trouble, communicating or speaking clearly about what they need or they're hard of hearing. And so I think there are a lot of real concerns about that. And we've, we saw a lot of that early on that, some of the patients start to become really attached with the AI. Like there's this woman, she's so cute. She calls one of our clinics and she's like, Daisy, I got you again. And she's just blown away. She's like, Daisy, you're on the phone every time I call. And their phone agent is named Daisy. And so, and she's one of these patients that, bless her heart, she calls 2 or 3 times a week to ask when her appointment is. She just doesn't remember. And she's not sure when it is. And so she calls for that reassurance. And she's so kind of excited that no matter how many times she calls back, Daisy answers the phone with the same smile and sort of, gives her that response. And so I think that's a great way to wrap it up, unless there's any other comments from y'all. I know we didn't get to all the questions, but again, wanted to be sensitive to kind of wrap this at 45 minutes or just short of it. We'll send an email out with the recap of the recording if you want to share it or rewatch it, or if you missed part of it and you came in late, not a problem. But appreciate you all for coming today, and thank you so much. And we will talk to you soon. Bye now.
Thank you.